I talked a lot about how if you're to come around the Plateau Mont-Royal, you got no shortage of coffee shops you can visit up from time to time. And on this part around Rachel Street East, there's already a handful of them that are pretty good. I'm here at Café Neve, which is not too far from where Replica is located, Le 30 Février, and even, oh yeah, Café Chez Teta is around the corner too. That's one that I hit up earlier in the year when I was doing a visit around Moulin Dumpling and then eventually on Mont-Royal Avenue East, once again. And I'm gonna put a card in the top right corner if you want to see that one once more. And speaking of which, welcome to another edition of the Wandering Ukie Cheese Café. So, I'm coming to you in the beginning of May 2025, but when this episode drops, it is gonna be around May 30th, which is gonna be one day after my birthday. So I thought I could do a little bit of a retrospective and maybe something that's a trip down memory lane, because when I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing that that's going to be my 40th, so it's going to be quite the anniversary. And while I have alluded to a lot of that on the channel over the last few episodes, there is a lot to think about right now. But I also realize that there's probably a lot from when I was growing up that brings back some memories. I think, wow, things were so different from back then, so I kind of want to revisit that, share some memories, and if I have any viewers who are younger than me, they probably will get to see what I had when I was growing up. So we're going to try to make this a nice fun one while walking around the streets. But before we do that, here's my suggestion for you. Click that subscribe button below and put the notification bell on so you can get a pop-up if there's a new video to view. And give me a like and a thumbs up. The more likes I get, the more these videos are promoted all across YouTube, so you're actually helping me a lot more than you realize. I probably should have asked if they have a lid for this thing, but what can you do? I'll just have to watch my steps while I'm walking around. I'm just going to continue along Rachel Street and then see where I go from there. So, I knew about the street growing up, and I probably talked about this a lot of times on the channel, but it was one of those areas that I passed by when we were with my dad, if we were driving into the city to visit the grandparents. So I remember getting off the Jacques Cartier Bridge that we'd pass by Ontario Street, we'd pass by Rachel, because that I remembered, Mont-Royal Avenue, and etc. So a lot of these just feel like street names I've seen passing by when I was doing my trips in a car. Of course, as time went on, I did my own exploring around some parts of the city, and also just looking around to see what's in the area. And it's changed a lot since I was a kid, for sure. Part of what I was thinking about when I was thinking of this episode is I know there's some older friends, some family members like uncles, aunts, and such who would be talking about their days growing up and looking at the past. And of course, people who are older always talk about how back in their day, times were so much easier and better. And while I could kind of get that to a certain degree, it's I'd be lying if I said I wasn't thinking about that myself, because given where I am now, I am looking back to see what life is like now compared to when I was a kid. Among a lot of things I could think about is, I'm definitely part of that last generation that grew up without having the internet or a cell phone in hand. Like trying to explain to someone that you didn't need a cell phone to go through life at all, or the fact that if you got one as a teenager that was always, you know, kid, put that away, it's gonna get jacked / stolen. And then you walk around the streets every day now, everybody has one in hand. And life without the internet, or at least 56K modem, where it took like 6 hours to download a 30-second video clip. That's the kind of downloading speed that we would have had back then, so it's kind of crazy to think about just the way it is. And of course, you didn't need as much technology back then, or, you know, life without the internet was pretty simple. You wouldn't have taken it for granted, or I guess I take it for granted that technology's so intertwined with us now that it kind of almost, it's a necessity for life and for work, of course. I even look back at some of those 80s, 90s classics that were released at the time. Like, I'm thinking this year, not only is it my 40th birthday, but it's also going to be the 40th anniversary of the original Back to the Future movie. And I remember also Back to the Future 2 and 3. I think 2 was the one I liked the most when I was a kid, just because it was the most futuristic one in the beginning, but I didn't realize just how dark the movie actually was until later on. But if I remember 2, Probably had that on VHS. And I might have told this story before about us going to Eaton's to get this for my dad for Christmas time, except I might have revealed the gift before, so I kind of embarrassed myself. But VHS movies at that time would have just been pan and scan. And if you don't know what that means, basically nowadays, you got your widescreen TVs, so you're able to see the film in its original size aspect ratio. But at that time, you're only able to get those movies like pan and scan because if you remember the old CRT TVs, those things were just like almost a square. Like instead of 16:9 as your ratio, it would be 4:3. So that meant that they had to be creative with the way they captured it on the VHS. They would sometimes have to pan, like move around, so you kind of be missing some of the gags and such. Wow. Here I am thinking about the song Hungry Heart by Bruce Springsteen, and over in that vintage store slash cafe, which I gotta hit up one of these days, they had a copy of The River right on display there. I only saw the back side of it, but I looked at the track list and I could definitely tell, like, yep, Hungry Heart was on that album too. It's like a far cry from, I don't know where I was going with that, but I was also thinking back to older stores, because I did remember the old Eaton's, which I've documented a lot. I'll put a card in the top right corner if you want to see my video on when I revisited the 9th floor restaurant. But I do remember that was only one of those department stores I was experiencing when I was a kid. There was also Sears, back when they used to have a presence in Canada. There was the Bay, which, like I probably mentioned a number of times on my videos, it's going to be closing down very soon. So the last of the major ones are going to be going away now. Such a shame. I remember a lot of those. I remember also being there for the tail end of Steinberg's, like a big grocery store chain in Quebec that, if you talk to people from a certain generation, they look back on it fondly, like instead of doing their shopping, they'll say they're doing their Steinberg's. Miracle Mart was another one I remembered. Maybe Woolco. What was another one? Oh yeah, I remember. If I think of Greenberg's, like shown on that mural close to Plaza Saint-Hubert, that's another one. Another memory of mine that I'm thinking back to is I was a Batman fan when I was a kid, all because I remember we got the 1960s movie on VHS too, and here I go talking about VHS again. Of course, I didn't realize at the time just how old that bloody movie was. Just enjoyed it, and well, thought it was amusing, but it was later on I realized, okay, this is supposed to be like a parody of superhero films. But I was also around too when the 1989 movie was having all the hype. So if you're to think back to that one, that's the Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson one. I was a kid when that was released, like 4 years old only, but I remember seeing the toys everywhere and just how much promotion it was getting when it came out in theaters. It probably was a big deal back then. And of course, here I am all these years later, and The Dark Knight is still one of my favorite movies of all time. Great way to adapt Batman, but make it seem like he could exist in the real world as much as he can be. This place always amuses me. Sailor Moon Beauty Salon and a nail parlor. I'm surprised that they're still open, because I'm sure the people who own the anime probably would have given a cease and desist the same way Disney does. Damn mouse overlords. Wait, what am I talking about again? Oh yeah, speaking of things I was remembering as a kid, or things I was around for, thinking back to an edition to 1989. Hang on. There we go, just wanted to maneuver around a little bit. But 1989 was also the year that The Simpsons premiered as a Christmas episode, and here we are now, and it's almost like approaching season 30, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, I kind of lost track because I haven't followed them since season 20. It's kind of still watching them when the quality went down, but I can definitely say that I recall getting into them in the mid-90s. Like, I was around for the time when the episodes, or at least the seasons, was good, and I was able to see them as they were being broadcast for the first time. I know people probably would have watched it on Fox if they were in the US. Us, we would have had it on CTV, or like CFCF 12 at the time. And eventually there were some reruns that were on CBC, and that's how I was able to catch up with some of the older seasons and got to see a bit of the evolution. See, imagine that. I was around for when The Simpsons was one of the best TV shows on TV. Here's another bar I should be hitting up one of these days, La Petite Marche, which I hit up like around 2022, but I wasn't really documenting it at a time. But I remember having a pint of a Belgique Blonde for about $5, which back in 2022, especially nowadays, is a crazy price to find, because you're lucky to get a pint of beer for $5, $6, even $7. It's mostly going to be happy hour specials. Turbo House has them, Piranha Bar, what else? Those are like the immediate ones I could think of offhand, so maybe one day I could try to do a list of all these bars with cheap beers on an episode. But what else is a big deal? Like, what was a money saver back then? I think I remember McDonald's used to have like a Big Mac trio for about $5, $6 with taxes. And I'm talking like Canadian prices. These days, it seems like that's so expensive that it could be approaching $20. And of course, a lot of those fast food places would have their distinct roofs, very colorful looks, and even playgrounds that, were a lot of fun to be around. Kind of feels like, I don't want to say it's a lost art, but it's definitely a lost style compared to what I see these days. Not that I really go to McDonald's. I may not be watching as many Simpsons episodes these days as I used to, but it's one show that I could always think of a joke or a scene like right off the top of my head and be able to go by memory of what it sounded like. I guess my memory works in strange ways, but I guess it also beats, I'd rather quote a Simpsons episode than have to sing the goddamn Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles song, because I'm pretty sure when I was a kid I was annoying my mom by constantly singing that or playing the VHS that we had. Man, my god, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's another one of those things, like the old 80s cartoon. That's something that if you didn't live at the time, you didn't realize just how big of a hype or how popular it was with everybody at the time. It was everywhere. Video games, obviously, which I already knew pretty well. I remember some weird Turtles crackers when I was a kid. And other stuff. Man. I'm sure they're also part of the old Saturday morning cartoons lineup, which, yeah, that's something else you gotta explain to people, that there was a time period where, you used to have your cartoons after school, but the big time for watching your cartoons was always going to be on Saturday mornings. For me, it was either on ABC or CBS. So things like Garfield and Friends, which is one of those cartoons that actually still holds up to this day because the writing is perfect if you're an adult too. Or, Bugs Bunny and Tweety would have been another one as well. But yeah, remember, always have to, watch those because I wanted to catch the multiple Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons that were around, and also maybe videotaping all of them on a Saturday when I had to go to Ukrainian school and to First Communion practice, where we were out pretty much all day. Here I was, like, surrounded by Ukrainian language when I didn't really understand it, or I was a bit of a nervous kid to try to pick it up, and I thought, I just want to be home watching Bugs Bunny and Sonic. Oh boy, I'm getting a bit nostalgic for the past again. I suppose it's funny that I brought up video games because it was definitely one of my biggest hobbies growing up. I guess I just wanted to sit at home, play Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario World, which I was around for also when it first got released, and etc. I don't really play that many new games these days, but gaming is definitely a big part of who I am, as much as a Simpsons joke would be. Because if you follow my channel, you could probably pick up on some of the obvious video game references. But that's actually something else I've been thinking about. When you look at a lot of the systems these days, it doesn't seem as much because it's mostly just graphical upgrades, like maybe some better pixels or better frame rate and such. But remember living through the earlier days of the Nintendo, like the NES, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, into the Nintendo 64, then GameCube. So it was like you got to see the whole evolution of like the hardware, what they were limited to doing at the time, but then seeing how the next generation had evolved and upgraded it. And I guess if you want to go further back, then look at before that with the Atari 2600, or the fact that a Pong machine was like considered, high tech for the time being. And tying it back to Eaton's too. Super Mario World is still one of those games that is always going to be near and dear to me because I was around for when that first got released, like I said, and I remember those kiosks that they used to have at Eaton's where you could go to the toy section, the electronics section, and then just try to play a bit of it before your parents drag you to go home. Unless you're trying to go there, but then some teenager is standing there spending hours just playing the whole thing. And then you go back 30 minutes later, he's still there. I had a lot of games that I remember picking up, or at least renting from back when you used to have a lot of rental stores from the time where if you want to go, your homework is done, or you don't have too much homework on a Friday, you want to pick up a game or a movie, you just go to your local rentals. Like, talk about when I did my hometown Wander, which I'll put a card in the top right corner for you to watch. Video VN was one of the big ones that we went to growing up, but for a lot of other people, it all depends. Further up on Beaubien here, like I'm not on Beaubien yet, but I'm on a Saint Gregoire, but if you go further onto Beaubien, there's a Club International du Video Film. That was another rental place we used to hit up. There was also one close to where I live, so that was actually our main one. I think the other one on Beaubien, I was just thinking because I remember riding around there and seeing, they have a chain of that. What else was there? Oh yeah, Blockbuster. I feel like that would have been the big one for everybody who was growing up at the time. But you know what? I think I'm gonna stop with my stories because it is getting to the point where I am gonna need a pint for myself. And luckily I just got into Christophe Colomb Avenue and I have just a spot I can revisit once again. Once again, I kind of had a bit of a bust of my plan. I was just right in front of the Belgian brewery over here. I thought it opens at 4, I could grab a pint right now, but turns out they're not open just yet. I gotta go back online and see what the hell's going on because what they posted there is not what it really is. But oh well. I'm just going up further along Christophe Colomb, and perhaps if I want to play it safe, I got plenty of my Beaubien spots or Plaza Saint-Hubert spots to go for. Maybe I do have an idea for some music I could play. I am in the mood for some psychedelic furs, so why don't we cue that up right now? Delicious. So I hit up one of my old spots around here. Luckily, Plaza Saint-Hubert has no shortage of great places I could grab a drink. So this spot, Le Vestiaire, is one of my favorite ones just because they have a good menu, great Quebec beers, and they rotate it every now and then. I have actually been here.
Sorry.
Ah, c'est correct.
C'est juste surprise.
Ah, ça arrive des fois.
Ouais, désolé.
That's what happens. You pull out a camera and everyone's always curious and wondering, hey, what's going on? C'est quoi ça? But, such is the life sometimes. As I was saying, I've actually been to the spot a number of times. One time I did cover it when I did a little hop around Plaza Saint-Hubert, where I showed off here, Le Nestor, and what was the other one? I think those are the two main ones I did, so I'll put a card in the top right corner and you can watch it. But one other thing that's pretty interesting about this spot, besides the Quebec beers you can get on rotation, is that they do have a small selection of imported Belgian beers. So if you like to get those, not necessarily just Delirium, some things that are bottled, it's worth visiting. What I'm actually doing is something from Le Prospecta, which is a good brewery that I'm kind of familiar with, but it's a brand new one. It's called L'agrume ne tombe jamais loin de l'arbre. So I think it translates roughly to the citrus doesn't fall far from the tree. At least it's my interpretation of it. It's a little bit like the expression, like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Like, I guess if you take after your parents or your grandparents, which kind of makes sense since I am a beer guy, and just like my dad, I do enjoy an occasional Labatt 50 as well. Perfect. Okay, that's a pretty good beer. And once again, I've covered this a lot of all of my videos, but the type of beers that I go for compared to the beers that my dad would have had, they're like night and day, because he would have had the classic blondes, like your Labatt 50, and back when they had it here, Wildcat, Old Milwaukee, I think Molson O'Keefe, like those are the ones he would have had more so. Things like this, like an IPA, well, to be fair, if I'm to think about it, there's a lot of the craft beers which try to imitate various styles all around the world, like a lot of the European beers with local products. That kind of scene really only took off in the last few decades. So at his time, this probably wouldn't even have existed or been around over here. My guess is you would have to import it or go to, like, if there are any local breweries around. Or I guess some bars, but everything I heard is that he wasn't really a bar guy. Like, he would always prefer to have a beer at home or just hang around with the family as opposed to going out drinking, versus my grandparents who would definitely go out to certain bars, including that one that's on the corner of Saint Michel and Masson, where one of my grandfathers would go bet on horse races around there. They call it the Monaco now, but who knows what it was called back then. So yeah, I guess the apple sometimes does fall a bit from the tree, but it is what it is, you know. And sorry, I'm just kind of lost in thought with everything that's changed since then, especially from his era or the era when I was a kid. One thing I remember is Dunkin' Donuts. They don't have a presence in Canada at all anymore. But if you were to look around in the early 90s and even in the 80s, Dunkin' Donuts were everywhere over here, like more so than the Tim Hortons. But then in the 90s, the Tim Hortons had started to take foothold. They expanded a lot more. Even in my area, they started to open up like one in the area, eventually a handful of them, so they're everywhere. Into the 2010s, the Dunkins would all start to close down, and there's only 3 of them that were left in Canada, all in Quebec, of course. Place Versailles, which was in the East End, I think I remember covering a while back. There was one on Wellington and Verdun that still had a distinct building, and one that was in Belleuil, somewhere on the South Shore, oddly enough. And then eventually those had closed, so there aren't any more Dunkins around here. I kind of miss them because compared to Tim's these days, those 3 still have the facilities to bake all their donuts like right on the spot, as opposed to getting it shipped frozen. But the trade-off too is if you don't want some Tim's, there's no shortage of artisanal donut shops around here where they make it from scratch. They're bigger, you pay more, but they're definitely a better product. Case in point, Homer's, if I'm to tie back to Simpsons again. Donuts can do everything. What can I say? Okay, I just noticed over here, on the concrete wall that's on the side of me, there is an El Bardo graffiti sign, which, you know, you see that if you're a Simpsons fan all the time, but you never think you're going to see it in real life until, like, now. But I digress. I had a good IPA over here, and I felt like I need to get some munching done before I hit the road, which meant I'm going to have to do a second pint for myself. Now, unlike the other one where I was doing a New England IPA, it was kind of on the strong side, I decided to go for a typical blonde, and it's something from the Bogart Brewery. They make one of my favorite cream ales. Oh, c'est parfait. Merci beaucoup. And the food just arrived too, so that's an extra bonus. Bulgar makes one of my favorite cream ales, but I'm gonna admit, I got this one just because of the name. They call this one J'aime ta blonde backup, and they call it an ordinary lager, which I feel like there's a double meaning for there, because blonde is like the typical blonde beer, but I like your backup blonde. One thing to remember is that in French, blonde is supposed to be an expression for a girlfriend, so it means, actually it could be a triple, like blonde for beer. It could also mean blonde, like your backup girlfriend, or maybe you have a mistress and you're not telling anyone. I don't know, but just figured good beer is good beer regardless. And at the same time, my food has arrived where I got myself a nice high quality mac and cheese. But what makes this one pretty interesting is that unlike other ones where they have a whole bunch of melted cheeses on top, this looks like they use squeak cheese or cheddar cheese that you use a lot in poutine. And then they mix up with bechamel, bacon, green onions, parsley, and macaroni for good measure. So it's looking pretty amazing. I've had it here a few times before, but I feel like this is one of the first times I'm documenting it on the channel. All right, now let's just make sure nothing flies away, because there could be some wind. All right, bacon, the sauce. Such a thing of beauty. Now that was a very good pair of brews and a good mac and cheese. So once again, if you want something kind of unique where they use poutine cheese instead of regular cheese, I highly recommend you come over here. But they also got some good burgers too. The one thing you gotta remember is that they don't seem to have a fryer here, so you can't get it with chips. You gotta get it with potato chips as well. And, ooh, actually, it's another good spot around here. What's it called? Milestone et Saucisson, which used to be Beaufort Bistro, which I used to hit up a few years ago. I did cover this around my July vacation from 2024, so I'll put the video in the top right corner for you to watch it. And overall, this is a pretty satisfying walk and a good way to kind of relive some memories and maybe share some stories from me when I was a kid and growing up, because let's face it, the past is actually pretty far in the past now compared to the future for me. Because I'm more than aware that when I was 10 years old, it's like 30 years ago, as I'm recording this, and I know that a lot of those days are not going to be coming back, and they're in the distant future, in the distant past. And that's without even thinking about the fact that my parents aren't really here anymore now that I'm, I mean, you've already known that story too, so I don't want to get too much into that. It's just a reality I have to face as well. But I always like to think that no matter what I'm doing, is that when I'm walking around, sharing my stories, wandering around, and I'm gonna be honoring their memory and doing the best I can for them. And hopefully family, friends, and anyone else who's watching me at random is gonna enjoy this too. And now, I'm gonna be working my way around and see if I finish up somewhere else, but I think it's gonna be an easygoing Saturday for me. So until then, thanks for watching this latest edition of the Wandering Ukie Cheese Café. If you like what you see, you know what you can do. Whew, kind of exhausted right now, but I don't know what's going on. Anyways, hit that subscribe button below and give me a thumbs up if you enjoy my wanders, my stories, and everything that comes with this. And if you have any ideas for future episodes, leave them in the comment section. I'll see what I can do. Till then, take care, see you next time, and enjoy the ride.